Mulțumesc! Bună ziua! Doresc să încep prin să-i saluta respectuos pe stimați antevorbitorii și pe cei ce mi vor urma, precum și pe toți participanți la acest seminar. Este o onoare pentru mine să mă aflu la această conferință alături de dumneavoastră. The COVID pandemic has presented enormous challenges to us as individuals, to us as nations. It has affected us globally and locally. But the corona pandemic has also overshadowed another ongoing challenge, the climate change. This is another serious threat that does not respect borders. And now, if not before, is the time to realize that our previous ways of life were not healthy, not for ourselves, nor for our countries. And we must realize that the next generations will pay the price if we ignore to take action and adapt our ways of life to the limited resources of our planet and to restore nature. This is, in fact, also what the President and the Prime Minister of Romania has clearly stated. And the corona pandemic has been and continues to be an enormous challenge, but it has also shown us that it is possible to do things differently and to do things digitally. In a way, necessity has created opportunity. And in this green recovery following the pandemic, we must visualize where we want to be 10 years from now, and then work our way back to understand what actions we need to take today. And there's a recent report by the International Energy Agency, which is called Net Zero by 2050, a roadmap of the global energy sector, and this is helping us to do precisely that for the energy transition. And so Sweden, my country, wants to become the first fossil-free welfare nation in the world. This means that we have set ambitious goals, a goal to have all renewable energy resources by 2040, to have zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2045, and we also have a strategy for circular economy, and Sweden is also the largest per capita donor in relation to climate financing to developing countries. And at the EU level, as you all know, there is agreement to, on a 2030 climate target, set to have a 50% reduction of emissions leading to climate neutrality by 2050. And of course, both Sweden and Romania, we are all bound by these same rules and targets. The Swedish climate goals, they have been adopted by the government, but also agreed by the parliament. This, in fact, ensures that there is a long-term vision and that there is a long-term perspective in implementing these goals. And these goals have also been set from the fact that greenhouse gas emissions can be combined with economic development. And this is an important point, not only for Sweden, the point that globalization of the economy, the global digitalization that is ongoing, and the international climate commitments that we are all abiding to, these have shown us that new technologies and innovations must be used in order for companies to maintain their competitiveness, for nations to maintain economic growth, while at the same time taking measures for climate. There's a concern sometimes raised here in Romania, also in my country, Sweden, that there will be economic loss and loss of competitiveness if companies have to adapt to a green and fossil-free future. What we see today is that many companies have already realized that the industrial age economic models are stagnating. They are no longer delivering the economic growth. So the Swedish industry has already started to adapt to this new reality and to have adapted their business models. Many companies, for instance, in the transportation sector, which is represented here in Romania, for instance, by Volvo Cars, Volvo Trucks, by Scania, they have adapted to more sustainable and more energy-efficient transportation. They are adapting to automatization, to electric vehicles, to the use of fuel cells, because this is what the future of the transportation field would look like. So Romania here has a huge opportunity to adapt to this reality in its planned infrastructure surge in the coming years. Another concern that is often raised is relating to jobs, jobs disappearing. And I think it's a fact that some jobs, some industries will disappear, such as, for instance, the coal mining. But here we must bear in mind that new jobs will appear in the green transition economy. And what our governments must do today is to address strategies and funds, of course, to retrain people, to upskill people, to adapt to this new economy. And so therefore it's excellent that Romania has already put budget funds into regions that will be affected by the energy transition, and of course that there will be also large amounts of EU funds that will be used for this structural change and transition. I'd like to mention a few key elements that have been relevant for so far the success of the Swedish transition to a green environment and economy. And one important element here is the collaboration between the government and the private industry. And another important element is that there is clear and predictable legislation in place. And also that there are government agencies that are independent, that have the expertise and the capacity to implement all these climate policies, because otherwise it is difficult to move forward. And lastly, of course, also that there is accountability, that we know, that we measure regularly how the change towards green transition is going. Finally, I want to say that Romania is fortunate to have important natural resources, but Romania also has important human resources, and it would be important for Romania to take into account all of its human resources in this recovery and transition phase that lies ahead. So, for instance, women in Romania are participating in work life and in entrepreneurship to a lesser extent than men. Persons belonging to minority groups are often excluded from the labor market because of discrimination. That can be Roma persons, that can be persons, LGBT persons, and persons with disability are sometimes even further excluded from the labor market because of lack of accessibility to workplaces or to schools. Diversity and inclusion in the workplace and in the management of companies has clearly been shown to give higher economic results to those companies compared to more homogenic companies. And companies here in Romania that want to take the opportunity to become more inclusive and more diverse could turn to the Romanian Diversity Chamber of Commerce, which is in fact the first chamber of commerce of its kind that helps companies to become more diverse and inclusive. Ultimately, I believe that the vision for our society is very much a shared one, that we prosper as nations and that we prosper in our daily life. So to achieve this, we must move forward with trust and with cooperation, and I believe that the best solutions will come forward when we work together, when different fields of expertise and experience meet and mix. And ultimately, this will benefit the transition into a more sustainable society. Vă mulțumesc!
Thank you very much.